Hi everyone, so the other day I decided to level a Druid alt in Season 4 just to see what I can do with the class, play some of the builds that I had prepared in Planner beforehand and just have a bit of fun with something that's not a rogue. And turns out Druid is actually extremely quick these days. So this is usually a class that is considered to be slow and clunky and bad to level up and all that. But it turns out that there are some setups that actually make this thing go really fast. In fact, I believe faster than I could do with a rogue. I've leveled 2 rogues already in Season 4 and I was not even close to this pace. However, one of them was my first character, so this has like nothing prepared, no mods or anything. And my second one, yeah, I did at some point stop leveling at like level 90. And then I started farming Hell Tides and all that kind of stuff, instead of just Nightmare Dungeons, which is usually the leveling strategy. But it turns out that the Druids, with Pulverize and also the new Wind Shear aspect, and the Blood Boiling aspect as well that you can see here, these little like red glowy dots like floating around, and when you collect them they explode. This is just an incredibly fast combo for leveling and also speed farming. I took this beyond the 100 as well. I started farming Hell Tides with this, for example, to try to max out the Iron Wolf's reputation with this. And the setup was just incredibly cool, fun, and I was faster than I've ever been with any character so far. Now, I'm not sure if Druid is actually the fastest class. I guess it remains to be seen when I go level other characters. I did not really try hard too much here with twinking out this character. I did do some things on the codex, I did imprint a few things, I did temper a few things, but since I hadn't even had a Druid beforehand, I had to find most of that stuff myself. I didn't have the Druid aspects, I didn't have the Druid tempers, so I just had like generic stuff basically. And also, I didn't have any like group help, so this was completely solo on hardcore, of course. And I also didn't really try hard too much with, like, for example, the double elixir strat that people do. I didn't use any 2 elixirs. You can use the anti-venom elixir for an extra XP boost. And I started using incense at like level 81, I believe. So at that point I was like, okay, this actually looks like a pretty fast time. Let's see if we can like ramp it up a little bit, and I'll try a little bit harder. But generally I just played as like a normal character that you would basically do at like season start, maybe like a bit optimistically with a few of the materials and a few of the aspects already in the codex. Some of those benchmarks that we have here is, for example, the curator entering World Tier 3. I did it at 1.5 hours at level 35. I was actually a little bit higher level than I wanted to be at that point, because I just had so many cinders from farming a Helltide that I just had to run around and open chests all the time because I didn't want to lose those. But you see here, the damage is actually crazy with this build. Like, this boss melts and I'm level 35. And it was kind of a similar story with Elias later. Here at level 50 and 2 hours 18 minutes, I managed to fight Elias. So this was only like 45 minutes after that. I went straight through Nightmare difficulty basically. And we also decimated Elias. And we were in World Tier 4 with Paragons unlocked, ready to go and blast. And the only stuff that I really did is I just crafted a few items, tempered a few items right before the curator, and then again right before Elias with sacred gear. And afterwards, usually I do like one more round of upgrades or so once I have a few ancestral items at like level 60, 70 or so. And then I kind of go all the way to level 100 with that gear. So it's kind of like the leveling strategy these days, so I don't waste much time in town and you can just go and blast XP. And what I was doing to get there was nothing really special. It's just a typical farm Helltide until level 50 and then farm Nightmare Dungeons until level 100 strategy basically. So nothing really extraordinary here. Just been doing like, you know, some Helltides, farming cinders, opening the chests, and trying to do maybe some whispers on the side if they were already present in the Helltide, and that was it. So it's basically a very normal leveling strategy here. So comparing this time to the Rogue right now, for example, I was at World Tier 4 at like 2 hours 20. On the Rogue, I was at World Tier 4 at like 1 hour 50 or so, also at level 50. But the thing is that Druid just kind of ramps harder and just goes faster than the Rogue. Rogue usually play with combo points. You have like this kind of like delay in combat before you actually deal damage. As a Druid, I just walk in there and everything explodes. So even though I entered World Tier 4 later, I just kind of like overtook what I was doing on the Rogue beforehand quite easily. And I would say that I would probably be like at least an hour slower to 100 on the Rogue than I would be here on the Druid. Maybe I can try to like min-max Rogue a little bit more, but the fact remains Druid is incredibly fast, and it's hard to beat this, I think. The cool thing about this build is you don't really have that much AoE damage with the pulverized shockwave. It does do the job for like, you know, kind of like same level or slightly higher enemies, Then you have those blood boiling orbs there that you collect. So this is usually how most of my AoE damage is done. I wait for an overpower, and overpower triggers these orbs here. You see this, there's like 10 of them on the ground. You just kind of walk through them as you go, and everything explodes around you. So this is how most of the AoE damage is done. And then the single target damage is the wind shear. So wind shear is kind of like all the rage right now on druids. People are pushing pit with this pretty high on stuff. And like this, you can actually make up for the big downside of pulverize, which is a single target damage. Towards the later stages, it was falling off a little bit because I was not really investing into my gear. As I mentioned, I just had like the same gear from like level 70 all the way to level 100 basically. So it did take a while sometimes to take down those bosses, but in between I actually decimated them in like 4 seconds sometimes. What you see here right now is literally my first nightmare dungeon in World Tier 4, and even here the boss was like half a minute or so. And then as I gained a few more levels and then got a few ancestral pieces, just rammed really hard to like a few seconds kill maximum, and everything else would just be insta one shot. So here's for example a clip when I'm level 70, so this was like around an hour later or so. And you see here how the boss is already melting with that wind shear strat. So in that case, I had like insane kill speed. I had capped movement speed at all times because of the shapeshifting with some of the passives that you get from the druids with extra movement speed. And then I actually found like a nice movement speed amulet, and I started blasting, and I was like constantly running at a cap and constantly exploding everything one shot around me. So it was amazing. And you see here, even without upgrading my gear, at level 89 or level 90 or so, I was still easily destroying those bosses with my low level, like around level 70 or so ancestral gear, without really worrying about upgrading it. So this kind of carries you all the way to 100 quite easily. And beyond that, if you want to just stay out of the pit, I guess, for a while. I was also finding a bit higher nightmare dungeons, but I guess after like 60, 70 or so, it does become a little bit of a struggle if you don't change the setup a little bit. So all in all, I ended up with 8 hours 42 minutes to level 100 on solo hardcore without any twin gear. So this is here my gear. You see I don't even have like sockets in half of my gear and all that stuff. So this is what it looked like, and nothing really crazy honestly, and this can be almost replicated even on like a fresh character because you don't really need any crazy aspect drops. The calm breeze aspect for wind shear, this is actually a codex power that I did at level 1. So I just made a character and straight went to the dungeon. I found a shockwave at some point, so I just put that on, and everything else is kind of like not really all too crazy, besides the blood boiling aspect, which is the one that produces these blood orbs that explode. So once you find that, you're kind of popping off even harder in AoE, but the shockwave pulverize can carry you early in the game anyway until you get it. So pretty easy to set up. This is the gear here, so I have made a planner for this afterwards. I actually have 2 variations here. One is the wind shear pulv combo leveling, and the other one is the full wind shear build. So the wind shear build right now is kind of like the druid build that all people are playing besides tornado. So I actually made a planner here, and there's actually like only a pretty minor swap, as you can see. I have the same paragon boards, most of the same glyphs, and I basically just changed one of the legendary nodes to another one here on the paragon. So it's very easy to respec this once you get to level 100 and you want to do like high tier pit stuff. At some point, pulverize just doesn't really cut it anymore for DPS. The blood bonding aspect is also not good enough, but this wind shear dot that you get from the calm breeze aspect is so powerful that it melts stuff for like millions and dozens of millions of dot ticks basically later on. So I kind of made this transition here very easy with this setup, and I made this second version here. But for now, what you need to know is if you want to level this druid and you want to speed farm this, this is the aspect here, blood boiling aspect. This is one of the season 2 powers with the orbs. Then you want to get a shockwave. If you level a fresh druid, if this is your first character, then you get this from the season journey. Otherwise, you have to find it. But I was actually playing without the shockwave for a while, and it was totally fine at the start because this calm breeze just kind of carried your damage on elites and on bosses, and the pulverize, and especially if you have the blood boiling, you were kind of okay anyway. And then the shockwave just helped you out with like more hits, more AoE. And the cool part about the shockwave is also it produces a second hit, and when you overpower with your pulverize, you produce more of those blood orbs here from the blood boiling aspect. So there's more stuff to walk through and more stuff to pop. So that was kind of a nice combo. And all the other stuff is basically just buffing the damage of the build. Most importantly for Moonrise. Moonrise buffs the wind shear, including the dot, and so does adaptability. So similar to other basic attack builds, use those 2 aspects here so that it can buff the calm breeze. This is where you get most of your single target damage. And then we have Use on Horror. We make Pulverize into an Earth skill that unlocks a few synergies from the tree here. And we go for a lot of these beasts and shape-shifting synergies. So we see this here on the skill tree right now. This is a bestial rampage build. We have quick shift, we have heightened senses, you have the 45 from natural fortitude, we have these shape-shifting passives for speed and damage reduction, and this is basically it. So you just go shape-shifting all the time, because Pulverize makes you a bear anyway, and then you have Bloodhowl. This is good enough to shapeshift you back and forth into werewolf, often enough, most importantly for this here bestial rampage. But even if you don't stay in werewolf form for 2 seconds, every 15 seconds, it doesn't matter too much. The attack speed is not the biggest deal. You mostly want the werebear buff here for 50% damage, and you're gonna get that easily. You just need to make sure that you stay in the 2 forms for 2 seconds every once in a while. And otherwise, you just shapeshift back and forth. So you can do like a left click, right click combo with Wind Shear and Pulverize to get quick shift quite easily, and then this gives you a massive damage buff. You get a bunch of other buffs here like speed and damage from heightened senses. We have stuff like resonance here. This is, for example, why we convert Shockwave, one of the Pulverize, into an Earth skill. We can benefit from these nature magic passives, for example. So this just helps you out a little bit. And we get the guaranteed overpowers from Provocation and from enhanced Pulverize. So you have like pretty frequent overpowers, and whenever you see those teal numbers or orange numbers popping up, you know this is the time to go run around and collect those blood boils. And for the other skills, I have like a sidecon armor here, I have an earthen bulwark. It doesn't really matter, it just helps you to survive a little bit, I guess. You can also do like a hurricane, or you can even do like a rabies or something if you want, but I don't think this is really that strong. Or a petrify, for example. So there are some options. Early game you could maybe also try some companions, like until like level 50 or so. They're really powerful, in particular the wolves and the poison creeper. You could just try to throw those in early game until you get in, for example, those aspects here. So this is usually like how you level Druid in the early game as well, with the wolves and the companions here. There are some other cool little synergies in this build as well that I included. For example, the poise glyph. I kind of like this one in a shapeshifting build like this, because every once in a while you get a barrier, a 30% chance to get 15% of your maximum life as barrier whenever you shift back and forth, and you do this all the time anyway, so that's kind of cool. And well, the rest is just like basic, like stack resistances, stack life, stack a bunch of like damage glyphs or damage reduction glyphs. There's exploit for the vulnerable, but it's not really that important on this build, I would say. And yeah, the rest is just like pretty straightforward stuff. A few legendary notes here that are important, mostly the Thunderstruck. So this one gives you your storm skills extra damage based on the close and distance damage bonuses they have in the gear. This in fact works for Wind Shear with the Calm Breeze aspect. So this is actually a pretty massive damage multiplier. You see this here, 229% in like a late game setup, because you can temper a lot of distant and close damage. So that's what you try to put on your gear, at least once you have the Paragons. Early game you can also just do like any other damage temper, like percent damage or something. But later, once you have the Paragons, you want to have that, just to have bigger dots. And also here we have Ancestral Guidance, so you get extra damage after spending Spirit. Since you polarize quite a bit, you can progress easily. And well, if you switch to the full Wind Shear variant, you don't polarize that much anymore. It's still like a nice support tool basically for the shifting and for the damage reduction effect that it has. And instead we go for Heightened Malice for the poison damage increase here basically. And that's it. So that's the setup. I will probably respec this to like the full Wind Shear build now that I'm actually 100 and fully decked out. And I will cover this build as well, so stay tuned for that. I'm going to be pushing the pit a little bit to see how that goes. I know people are already like over level 100 with this, so it is actually popping off pretty hard. And there's just like a few aspect changes as well. When you go to full Wind Shear, you don't need the blood boiling anymore, you don't need the shockwave anymore or the Usain horror, and instead we go for two-handed Moonrise, big damage for the Wind Shear, and then we have something like Rapid and Edge Masters just for like a bit more DPS as well. And most of the setup actually stays pretty similar. So that's it for now with the Wind Shear build. So that was really fun to level. I had a great time with the Druid. Hope you enjoyed this build as well. I know some people have already tried this that were watching me on stream. So let me know what you think about it. If you have any suggestions for this, how you like it. Otherwise, stay tuned for more Druid stuff to come soon. And I'll see you guys next time.